Ride hard, stay home, the podcast. Welcome to Ride Hard or Stay Home, the podcast. This is where we mostly talk about motorcycles, but we generally talk about anything that you have to do hard. And as far as I'm concerned, that's everything. Welcome to the show, guys. Stay tuned, and we'll get right into it.
That boy can go 100 miles an hour in first gear, I tell you.
Welcome to Ride Hard or Stay Home, the podcast. I am your host, Mr. Rhosh, Mr. Ride Hard or Stay Home, and I would once again like to welcome everyone, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to the show. You guys, we have an awesome show lined up for today. Everyone who caught the teaser last week knows that I have a special guest today to talk about a special car. At the time that our special guest purchased this vehicle, there were only 400 of these vehicles in the United States. An amazing car that's been gone for almost 2 decades. It was produced from 1978 until 2002. They stopped production. They brought it back in 2020. The friend of the show, the friend of Ride Hard or Stay Home, the podcast, has the 2021 version of this vehicle. You guys saw the thumbnail to the show. It is the 2021 Toyota Supra, and it is a beast, ladies and gentlemen. This is a car that truly deserves to be focused on and highlighted on this podcast. This podcast dedicated to all things fast. Ride it hard or you stay home. Yes, sirree. So we'll be getting into that interview with that friend of the show. And, well, might as well say it. You saw the license plates. Late Apex, Mr. Late Apex, who's called into the show on numerous occasions, who shared his information and his knowledge with regards to motorcycle. He rides a Yamaha YZF R1, a track day enthusiast as myself. And he's also a fast car enthusiast. And let me tell you, I have been in the car with this gentleman on some back roads, these twisties turned, man. He is an amazing driver. It's awesome. I can't wait to take a ride off in that Supra. I'm actually going to get the opportunity to get behind the wheel of that Supra. And let me tell you, I am excited. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a big show lined up. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back and we're going to kick this thing off. Ride Hard or Stay Home, the podcast. We'll be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back and let's get right into it. The Toyota Supra. What an iconic automobile this vehicle is. And let me give you guys a little history on the Toyota Supra. The first generation of Toyota Supra was not actually its own vehicle. It wasn't a Supra. It was actually the Toyota Celica. They put a Supra name on the end of the Celica. It was an edition of the Celica, the Supra edition. So this first generation of the Celica Supra, which was the A40/A50 model, was produced from 1979 to 1981. So then they came with the second generation, the A60 Toyota Supra, which was produced from 1982 to 1986. It was then followed by the third generation, the A70. And at this point was when the Supra split from the Celica and became its own car in the mid 1986. So this third generation A70 Supra was actually produced from 1986 and a half through 1992. After the third generation, of course, we go to the fourth generation, which was the A80 Supra, produced from 1993 through 1998, which also at this time came with a turbo option, 1998 Supra. I'm not sure if prior to the 98 the turbo was available, you know, in the A80 generation, the fourth generation, 93 through 98. I know in 98 a turbo was offered, but I'm not sure prior to that. I will have to do a little bit more research for that, you guys. But like I said, there was the 4th generation Supra, which was an awesome vehicle. And then we get the 5th generation Toyota Supra, A90 to A91, produced from 2020 onward. Now, everybody knows that the Toyota Supra has a cult-like following. From movies like Fast and the Furious to track days, there's organizations who strictly do nothing but race Supras. You will see the Supras on drag strips and straight races. You will see them on road courses. You will see them in autocross. The Supra pretty much does it all, and it does it well. This is a vehicle that has the potential for tunes to take this thing from one level to out of the atmosphere. Like, you have so many options to tune these cars and to turn a beast into a super beast, just a monster. I've never owned a Supra. Now, I have driven some of the earlier generation Supras. Never one that was actually had significant modifications done to it. The Supras that I've driven were ones that were mildly modified by people, some exhaust code air, nothing special. But this new generation Supra that our friend of the show, my buddy Late Apex, has, man, I have seen some videos of some tuning that's been done to these newer cars, and it is amazing the power that they're getting out of these new generation Supras. There's actually a gentleman who has tuned this car and made it a 8-second car. Come on, that's fast, you guys. I was looking at a video the other day. Late Apex sent me a couple videos. We're talking about a quarter mile in the 8-second range, over 150 miles an hour in a Toyota Supra. Man, these cars are awesome. Now, I do have to say one thing. One thing, Toyota, and I'm going to talk to Late Apex about this when he comes in for the conversation and the interview, but Toyota was wrong for what they did with this car between the 2020 model and the 2021 model. They brought the Supra back for a 2020 model, and then guess what? The next model year, 2021, the version that Late Apex has, they increased the horsepower by like 40 horses and a big boost in the torque. I mean, if I had bought a 2020 and then the next year model, we're talking about 40 more horsepower and a big increase in torque, man. Oof, I'll be hot. And let me give you some specific numbers on this. So Car and Driver magazine, they took the 2020 Supra and they put it on the dyno. And running the car on the dyno, they came up with 345 horsepower, 409 foot-pounds of torque. This is the 2020 Supra. Now, even those numbers are more than what Toyota claimed that the engine made at the crank. Toyota said that the vehicle was making 335 horsepower at the crank. No, it's making more than that. The 2021, oh my goodness. After some dyno runs with the 2021, that engine put down 388 horsepower and 421 pound-feet at the wheels. Now, come on, you guys. The 2020 model, 345 horsepower compared to 388 in the 2021. 409 foot-pounds of torque in the 2020 compared to 421 foot-pounds of torque in the 2021. Man, that's a lot more power that you're getting in a model year. And there's a reason why this happened. Late Apex was telling me why this happened, and I'm going to let him get more into that for you guys. But all of this really has to do with the fact that the vehicle was a team effort. Now, I didn't get into this with you guys. In the teaser that we dropped earlier this week, I told you guys that this vehicle was produced by 2 different car manufacturers from 2 different countries. And what happened was Toyota from Japan and BMW from Germany they teamed up and they made this awesome vehicle. Now, with that partnership, there were some rules that were put in place by BMW. And this is the reason why we saw the change, the increase in horsepower and torque from one model year to the next, from the 2020 to the 2021 version of the vehicle. The difference in the power was all due to regulations put in place by BMW. And we'll let Late Apex get into that. So you know what, guys? I'm not going to continue talking about this vehicle. I am going to let an owner of this vehicle finish telling us all the pros and the cons of the 2021 Toyota Supra. We're going to take a quick little break, and as soon as we get back, we're going to talk to Mr. Late Apex and his 2021 Toyota Supra. Ride Hard or Stay Home, the podcast. We'll be right back.
Nice car. What's the retail on one of those?
More than you can afford, pal. Ferrari.
Smoke. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and I'm sure any car buff, any movie buff knows that scene that I just played. Fast and the Furious, ladies and gentlemen. Paul Walker in the Toyota Supra pulls up beside a Ferrari and proceeds to beat him in a race. A Toyota Supra beating a Ferrari. Let me ask you guys something. Do you think that that is strictly for the movies, or could that actually happen in real life? Let's ask an expert. Ladies and gentlemen, as promised, here with us live today in the Ride Hard or Stay Home, the podcast studios. Well, not in the studios. We're doing it over the telephone, but we are live. Mr. Late Apex, welcome to the show, sir. How are you today?
I'm doing good this morning. Thank you, and I appreciate you having me on your wonderful show.
Well, we appreciate you willing to give us a little bit of your time in the past when we're talking about your R1, and today when we're talking about your 2021 Supra GR. Now, first question for you, for those who don't know, what does the GR stand for?
The GR stands for Gazoo Racing. That's like a subdivision of Toyota. They basically send these guys out and say, hey, you guys get into the motorsports area, see what's going on. What can you guys come up with? Like a special branch of Toyota, kind of like AMG, Mercedes, kind of like the M department. Same concept with GR.
Okay.
GR Supra.
Gotcha. So when you see that GR badge, it lets you know there's a little extra something there for everybody. Is that right?
Yes. Basically, you don't have the Toyota Camry engineers working on this car. When you are a GR engineer, you're specific to, and that's not a knock on the Toyota Camry. They sell a lot of those cars, are good vehicles, but GR is specific to Toyota's racing and engineering branch of that company.
Gotcha. Is this the first Supra that you have owned?
No, it's not. This is my second Supra. First Supra was an 86, 87. Mark III Supra. Had it, man, probably has been 18 years ago, man. Turbocharged inline six, rear drive, very heavy car. It was an old car when I bought it, but nevertheless, still had fun with it. And that was my first introduction to Toyota's inline six Toyota Supra.
Okay. Now, I'm happy you just said something, and I've got to go back now and make a correction to some information I gave the listeners earlier in the show. I had told them that as far as I knew that turbo was not introduced until the to the 90s, to the fourth generation Supra. But now I know that's wrong because you told me your 87, it was turbocharged, and I'm looking up some stuff right now, and it says, let me know if I've got good information here, that in 87, they did add a turbocharger to the Supra, boosted horsepower to 230 horses, and cut 0 to 60 time down to 6 seconds. As far as OEM, does that sound about right to you?
Yes, that's about right. And you know, everyone that's listening, you got to figure back in 1987, you know, 230 horsepower was a lot of power. 6 seconds was a brisk 0 to 60 time. I know now 6 seconds we have minivans that come close to that now. Or, well, I don't want to say minivans. Let's just say we have big luxury sedans that you wouldn't expect that can get into that range. But that was very fast back in the day, 230 horsepower.
Yeah, 230 horsepower in the 80s. That was a nice amount of horsepower. And 0 to 60 in 6 seconds, like you said, that might seem slow now, but in the 80s, that wasn't slow whatsoever. But you know what, sir?
No.
We are not in the 80s. We are in 2021, and you've got a new baby over there. So why don't you start off? First of all, I had told the listeners earlier about the power situation as far as the change, the increase in horsepower from the 2020 model to the 2021. Now, before we kind of get into that, had you actually looked at the 2020 model for purchasing, or did things work out that you decided not to go with the 2020, or how did that work out with you buying a car?
Well, buying the car was an accident, actually. We'll talk about that later, maybe in part 2. But
okay,
because I saw the 2020. Huh?
I'm sure everybody wants to know how you accidentally bought the car, but let's
right. Yeah, that was an accident, but yeah, and that involved my wife as well. So.
Well, hey, if everybody remembers the American Muscle podcast that we did, and there was a situation with you and Mrs. Late Apex with that Hellcat Challenger that you drove. So we know, with the Supra, you got the okay for that one.
Yeah, I've had several accidents. Like even the R1 was kind of an accident that she didn't know about. So that's another subject we'll get into. But we do it out our wives. So that's my balance.
Yes,
but
sir.
Man, I looked at the 2020 Supra and I was excited that it came back. Just like everyone else online, I had my doubts. The car was smaller. The car was going to be lighter, shorter wheelbase. And I saw 335 horses, and I thought, there's no way I'm paying that for $56,000. And at the time, Toyota was charging markups. You know, there was $20,000 markups on these cars initially. So it was out of the question. But the horsepower situation, I had been following some underground insider stuff. Gazoo Racing engineers basically said every year they were going to have updates to the vehicle. So I thought, I'll wait. And 2021 came, and here we go. 47 extra horsepower, 382 horses now, quoted from Toyota. And the dealers had started to come down off of their high horse. And I thought, man, this may work. This may work. $60,000. 382 horse. I still didn't really like the horsepower number. I thought, man, it really should have had more power than that. But I didn't know, exactly what GR Toyota had in stock.
I know, I kind of know, your history as a car dude coming from the West Coast. Now, you're down here in the Middle Tennessee area, and I have ridden with you in your Infiniti, on some of these curvy back roads, and really impressed by your driving. I know I wished at some points I would have had my own brake pedals on the passenger side, but I didn't. But I was trying to press them. But you're a really great driver back there. And have you got a chance to take the Supra through a little play time yet?
I have. I've put 1,800 miles on the car since it's been in Middle Tennessee. I drove 800 miles from Baltimore. Put 800 miles on the car on the back roads of Tennessee, and let me tell you, that car, the engineering in the suspension, in the rear differential, the chassis stiffness, it is an absolute knife on back roads. The car, the transmissions shifts are within 150 milliseconds.
Wow.
Which is I don't know if I don't even have a reference to give to the listeners, but 150 milliseconds, that was Ferrari F430 territory just 15 years ago. So now we have a vehicle that has a competent chassis, competent suspension, responsive engine, and a lightning quick transmission. So it's very fast on the back roads.
And we're talking about an 8-speed automatic, because they don't offer manual with that car, right? Just strictly automatic.
I've been following, the collaboration between these two companies closely, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be a manual that will arrive probably at the end of this year. I hope people don't crucify me for this, but that's what I'm hearing online is there is a manual coming. There's a manual coming to the lineup.
I think we kind of got just a little bit sidetracked here, and I have to put that on me. That's my fault. I asked you a question. But back to this power thing. Now, we were talking a little bit off the air, and you had been telling me that the reason for the 2020 version not getting the power that the 2021 version has is due to the BMW partnership. Because per my understanding from our conversation, the engine that's in your vehicle now, the 2021, was available in 2020, but they opted not to put that in the Supra. So can you kind of give us a little background on what the reasoning that BMW required that to happen?
Yeah, and it's pretty simple to people that the bean counters, there's bean counters on both sides. To us enthusiasts, we don't want to hear it, but to people, companies, organizations that are into making money, the bean counters, it makes perfect sense. So basically, the Supra has a cult following around the world, and it's a more popular car than the sibling counterpart to the Supra, which is the BMW Z4. Toyota wasn't allowed to have access to that specification or that version of the B58 power plant that's in the Supra in 2019 for the 2020 model. So it's simply, they did not want the Toyota Supra to hurt the sales of the BMW Z4. And a little bit of insider info to that, BMW had actually axed the Z4. The Z4 was dead.
Right.
The only reason we have a Z4 today is because of Toyota's money that they infused back into BMW. So basically, Toyota paid BMW for the parts and helped develop the parts with BMW. In turn, BMW gives Toyota rights and licensings to different software and different parts out of the M department. So Toyota resurrects the legend, the Toyota Supra. BMW brings back the Z4 for the top-down roadster enthusiast.
So then now this brings a question to me. So the Z4 and the Supra, they share a lot of the same design. So with that being said, you've got a roadster. The Z4 is a roadster, and then you've got the Supra, which is a hardtop vehicle. How did they go about designing the same frame to be able to have both applications? Because normally when you're dealing with, a convertible style vehicle, they have to put extra support in other places, to kind of compensate for the top being gone or not having a hard top.
You're exactly right. So that will fall into line with people that are asking, oh man, they just took a Z4 chassis and put a different body on it. That's not what happened. Basically, that chassis had to be engineered from the ground up for a hardtop. So once that part happened, it was fairly easy to come up with a convertible solution for the BMW Z4. Now, the internet's on fire about it's too much like a BMW. And yes, when you get in the car, it is, I mean, if you've been in a new BMW, 18 or 19, and you get into a GR Supra, it's BMW territory. It is BMW territory. It's if someone blindfolded you and stuck you in a GR Supra, you wouldn't know what you were in. You would think you were in a BMW. Now, genetically, they are related, but the physical performance of the cars, they are vastly different. And a little insider info for people that are listening: the BMW Z4 was designed its intention was to attack the Porsche Boxster. That's in that car's line of fire. The Toyota Supra was basically designed to attack the Porsche Cayman GT4.
Okay.
Now I know that is a lot to bite off, but the Toyota Supra, that was the intention when these mergers put these cars together. Every automaker that has certain cars in different classes, they have the competitors, and that competitor is Porsche.
With that being said, with the competitor of the Supra being the Porsche, and you're owner of the Supra, have you driven any Porsches?
The last Porsche I was in, man, probably was back in, goodness gracious, man, the early 90s.
Okay.
And it was I really didn't get to put the car through any paces, to see how it handled. But I will say this: those are large shoes to step in.
Yes.
That's a very large role to get yourself in, coming from BMW and Toyota, to say, hey, we're not going to attack. We're not going after a Lotus Elise. We're not going after some other roads. We're going after Porsche. These are the cars that in modern times are almost indestructible. They're virtually indestructible. They're well refined. Porsche's been doing this for 50 years. These aren't cars that's come around and they developed it and then we're going to discontinue and then we're going to bring it back. These cars have been in constant refinement for 50 years. So for BMW and Toyota to come out with something that's capable of attacking a Cayman or a Boxster at an affordable price point, I think it's a win-win for all car enthusiasts.
What I kind of found is, while I was doing my research, on the vehicle and getting ready, prepping for the show, a lot of people initially, when they heard about the BMW and the Toyota teaming up to design this vehicle, some people were going in the direction that they thought that it was just going to be like some type of rebadging going on. Say, for instance, like the Toyota, I want to say it was the Toyota Corolla and maybe the Geo Prism.
Yes, that's one. That's a famous one. That is a famous collaboration.
I want to say GM, maybe they also did it like with the Trailblazer and a Saab. I want to say a Saab SUV. But basically, you're taking a vehicle, making a couple of cosmetic changes, and putting on the next manufacturer's badge on the car. I know, in those years past, some manufacturers thought, hey, it's a better option for us just to purchase these vehicles from another manufacturer, make a few changes, put our badges on them, and sell them as our product. And a lot of people were thinking that was going to happen between the Z4 and the Supra with the partnership of Toyota and BMW. But it's not nothing like that. I mean, they actually, like you said, they started from the ground up with the design on this vehicle. This is not a rebadging. This is not taking a Toyota badge and slapping it on the Z4.
No, it is not. And I believe really the reason why we're hearing, the murmurs and the complaints of it's just a rebadge is basically because of the most recent Toyota Subaru collaboration with the Subaru BRZ and the Toyota FRS, or now the FT86. Basically, those cars are identical.
Right.
You get in them, you drive them, you wouldn't know which one you were in if you didn't see a badge someplace.
Correct.
The Z4 and the GR Supra are distinctly different in driving dynamics and characteristics. Now, this is according to the professionals that's driven. Chris Harris, I don't even know if I'm allowed to say his name on there, sorry. But anyway, We'll plug him.
We don't mind getting plugs here. It's all good.
Yeah, he's been in the vehicles, as have a lot of the world automotive journalists. And basically, when you do the homework on the vehicles, or basically drive both of them if anyone has access to them. But Toyota developed the suspension, basically tuned the suspension to their specification for that car. Anyone that knows about having a flexible chassis, you're going to have different anti-roll bar settings, different sway bar settings, and different dampening settings when you have a chassis that would flex more. I'm not saying that the convertible Z4 is flexing more, but it is a open roof vehicle, so it's an inherent design that chassis is going to flex. Now, when you look at the Toyota Supra, it has a chassis stiffness comparable to the Lexus LFA, which is a $350,000 car that Toyota made, all carbon and Kevlar. So when you have a vehicle with a chassis that's that stiff, you have the option to go with more aggressive anti-roll bar and suspension dampening settings. So when you drive these cars, these vehicles, they have a different driving characteristics. They're not rebadged. They're not rebadging of the same vehicle. Even the tuning. When you go back and look at the 2020 Supra, we're talking about computer tuning, ECU tuning. 2020 Toyota Supra was rated at 335 horsepower. BMW Z4 was rated at 382 horsepower. And in a drag race, the 335 horsepower Supra outran the Z4 with 382 horsepower. And I'd attribute that to weight, but they basically gave Toyota a little bit of leeway in the engine tuning, which I guess to the enthusiast, or maybe this will come up later on, but I don't know if we're going to discuss that now, but the true horsepower of the 2021 GR Supra is not quite what's being advertised.
No, I actually went into that a little bit earlier in the show. Toyota is underrating the horsepower and the torque because Car and Driver, they actually put the 2020 and the 2021 through the dyno test. And, both vehicles, the horsepower and torque is more than what Toyota is saying that they're putting the power and torque is being put to the ground. So as a consumer, as a buyer, that's always good. When you can get more than what you're told you're getting and it doesn't cost you anymore, hey, that's a win.
Yeah, I think that's that under promise and over deliver phrase that we hear from time to time. And I guess we're letting the cat out of the bag then, since you've touched on that. Well, it's no one really knows how much drivetrain loss that the BMW / Toyota drivetrain is experiencing from the engine to the wheel. Some say it's 15%, as high as 15%. Some say it's as low as 9%. But that rear differential has multiple clutch packs in the rear diff, which allows the car to transfer torque from 0 to 100%, depending on which angle the steering wheel is turned, left to right, within a few split seconds. So with multiple clutch packs, it'd be hard to believe a single-digit drivetrain loss factor. So we really don't know how much power. We're just estimating anywhere between 440 and 450 horsepower in a vehicle that weighs between 3,300 and 3,400 pounds with 150 millisecond shift times. That's a recipe for a very fun and exciting drive.
Oh yes, and I mean, I cannot wait. I know we're going to do a part 2 to this, and when we do a part 2, we're actually going to have some video. It's going to be on YouTube, that particular podcast, when we're dealing with the Supra, the part 2. But man, I cannot wait to, number one, be a passenger so I can see how the car actually handles with a driver like you, and then me, to get in the driver's seat for just a minute to kind of mess around, because there's no way I wouldn't attempt to drive your vehicle like you drive your vehicle, even if it was my vehicle. That's just not how I roll. I mean, but for all the listeners out here, we were some more buddies. We were out riding motorcycles one day on some back roads, and we came across. Yeah, so
here it comes.
We're out there, and me and my buddy, we've got another buddy, and we were in the Cena units, and he saw this vehicle, and he was like, it was a BMW, and he said, man, that looks like Late Apex up there in that BMW. I'm like, huh? So we caught up with him, and let me tell you guys, what BMW was that you were in that day? Was it an M3?
You know what? Surprisingly, it wasn't an M3. I guess we're letting the cat out of the bag. I was invited to go on a drive with BMW of North America, and that was actually a BMW 335i with the Sport Pack.
Okay.
Sport Pack equipped 335i. It had an M3 wheel package on it, so that's probably why it looked a little more aggressive than your grocery getter 3 Series.
Well, I'm here to tell anybody, you know, especially motorcycle riders, people automatically think that when you're on a motorcycle, typically you are the fastest thing out there, but that depends on what type of road or what type of circuit you are on. And I will tell you, those 1000cc R1s could not do anything with that 3 Series BMW on those country roads and those turns and twisties, man. I tried my best to keep up with Mr. Late Apex in that BMW, and I could not do it, man. And I wouldn't recommend anybody actually trying to do it because it's probably end up pretty bad for you. Like when we finally got to the end of the road, like I'm smelling the brakes on that Beamer. And it wasn't because the brakes were damaged. It was just that's what happens when you are driving very aggressively, hard braking in turns and corners like that in that vehicle.
Well, you know what? It's a little bit of information about that car. I say run-of-the-mill 3 Series, but that's not a pushover vehicle, that BMW 3 Series. And I guess this kind of goes in line with why Toyota decided to go to BMW for production of an inline 6. That 3 Series was actually a twin turbo car, the N54. It had a twin turbo power plant. It had extra oil coolers, and it basically had a version of the SMG3 transmission, which is another very fast shifting transmission. So when you put that into a package like that, and you get behind the wheel and onto a back road, it's a recipe for fun. And we're going to have people running off the road. I really was afraid of the R1 because I do own an R1. You know, I do ride, on the track with Mr. Rhosh and Jix of Fun and the Boogeyman, and I know how fast those bikes are. So I thought to myself, I've got to get this thing. I've got to get out on these tight corners and get some distance before these doggone bikes hit the straightaways, because acceleration on a leader bike, if anybody's ever been on one, is astronomical. How quickly you can go from 60 to 160. So that was an eye-opening experience. And at one time, man, funny story, the owner of the car was like, "Hey, you might want to stop. I don't see those bikes back there. We thought someone had fell. We thought someone had crashed. We thought someone crashed."
No one crashed. We just couldn't keep up.
Yeah, that was a fun day. But
so, I mean, comparing the response and the drivability of that BMW on the back roads compared to your Supra, what's the comparison?
I was pretty fast in that 3 Series. I haven't driven it a lot. When I initially got in the Supra on the back roads, I was initially slower because it's a learning curve.
Right.
Like anything, it's a learning curve. The owner of that 3 Series was actually at my house within an hour of me getting that car in the middle of Tennessee, and he drove the car. Coming from, in his words, the GR Supra does everything a lot faster. The reaction times, the shifts, the throttle response, the torque. The torque comes on early. the quoted torque numbers are the quoted torque numbers, but whatever it is, it's there right around 2,000 RPM. So when you have torque coming on that early versus a twin turbo car that's using we say twin turbo, it's sequential turbocharging. So basically the smaller turbo basically gets the engine going until the larger turbo kicks in.
Right.
So, but you have 6 ratios versus 8. This GR Supra has 8 ratios, 8 forward gears. So now when you have that much gear, your acceleration is that much quicker. Depending on, and of course, depending on other, variables like your tires and stuff like that and gripping. But I've driven both. The Supra is a faster car. It's a much faster car. The owner, basically, he's probably put 40,000 miles on that 3 Series. Everything was much faster in the Supra, much quicker. So these aren't cars that are just being put out there with kind of identical parts, and there's really no performance gain from one model to the next. That's just not happening. There's a clear advantage with some of these newer vehicles.
Now, did you we know the Supra has always been a rear wheel drive vehicle. As you were following when they came out with this car as a concept and all of this, did they ever at any point say we're thinking about making this an all-wheel drive vehicle, or do you think the rear-wheel drive is just that's part of the heritage of the Supra to keep it just strictly a rear-wheel drive?
I think that's part of the heritage of the Supra. I believe if Toyota would have put or developed some type of BMW X-Drive type 4-wheel drive system, we probably would have had riots down at the Toyota headquarters because you're going away from the traditional front engine rear drive layout. There's already enough people ready to go to war over having a BMW source power plant driveline. So all-wheel drive would have. I'll say this: it would have really irritated the Toyota Supra purist. But the performance guys, anybody that's into performance, probably would have given it a shot. There's a couple things you don't do. You don't turn a front engine rear drive, icon into an all-wheel drive hybrid. You don't do that. And you definitely don't put American muscle into Japanese cars and vice versa.
Right.
Those are just kind of fighting maneuvers.
Well,
that kind of stuff
I will have to say now, people are dropping LS Chevys into pretty much anything they can get them into.
Yes. Yes. I've seen a lot of those swaps. We've known people that's done a couple of swaps, and they've had their reasons to do them. I didn't like a lot of the drops. A common one you see is the LS into the old 3rd gen Mazda RX-7.
Yeah,
that's a common one. People have their reasons, but if a manufacturer were to do that, I think it'd be suicide for the platform.
I'd probably have to agree with you on that there. I do. Man, that car you have is a very unique, and it's a sexy automobile. When you pull that vehicle out, man, what type of reaction do you get from other drivers or other people around you?
Well, the first reaction I get is people running up behind the car, trying to see what the heck is that? What is that? What is it? The car is all black, so you really have to take a look at it just to even, get a grasp on the lines even. But my wife noticed it. We were in Franklin maybe a week or two ago, and the first people to notice are the kids, to be honest with you. Not the adults that can afford them. It's the kids.
Who wish they could afford them.
Yeah, it's the kids. All of the kids were jumping up and down, pointing, slapping hands. They were just like, oh my goodness, look. Is that a Supra? wiping their face, pulling their glasses off. Is that a Supra? Like, you can kind of read their lips. That's the initial reaction. At gas stations, people will just pull in and just stop and stare at the car. We've had people driving down the interstate at 75 miles per hour, pulling their phones out, trying to record. Even though that's extremely dangerous, they're trying to video the car, because at the time of my purchase, there weren't a lot of these in the country. So it's a fun car to drive. It definitely gets a lot of attention. I don't mind the attention, because I react the same way when I see Supras, and I own one. Whenever I see them, I react the same way, and that's the enthusiast, the enjoyment of, hey, someone else is having a good time. They've got that feeling that I have when they drive. Well, I hope they have the same feeling, but
I want to touch on just reliability for a minute here. Now, I know it's a brand new vehicle. You haven't had it 3 months yet. And there's not a lot of data, of course, on reliability. Of course, not the 2021 version, but the 2020 version. I know I'd asked you, we were talking earlier, and I'd asked you if there were any recalls that you knew about on the vehicle. And you told me that you only were aware of one recall that only affected 7 vehicles. So I actually went and did some research on that to verify that, because that's what us journalists, I'm not even a journalist, but I got a podcast, so I got to make sure I get good information out there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
You were, hit the nail on the head. There was a recall over, check this out, everybody, a seat belt guide loop mount. That was the recall. And out of that recall, Mr. Late Apex told me, he said there were only 7 units. And he was right. There were only 7 units affected by this. And out of those 7, only 1 belonged to a private owner. So, other than that, there was an issue with a backup camera, and that was resolved with a software update. So nothing major whatsoever. That's really got to make you feel good, especially, when new model cars come out, there's going to be gremlins and issues generally, especially with that first year model. But then again, we're dealing with, Toyota, who, man, they've always made a product that was very high up in reliability. BMW does have a few gremlins here and there, especially in electrical, but it doesn't seem like the Supra is going to have any issues with that. What do you think?
I believe the people that own this car, they're going to fall into several classes, but we'll narrow them down to at least 2. One, they're going to be the super enthusiasts like myself, also car enthusiasts, but specifically, I'm a Japanese car, German car enthusiast. So I didn't think or worry about, hey, is this thing going to be reliable? Is it going to break down? Because we will make do with what we have, and we will find workarounds for whatever issues that come up. Most issues, unless it catches fire and burns to the ground. And then you have the people that, they pay $60,000 for the vehicle, and they think they've paid $200,000, and it's supposed to wake them up in the morning. It's supposed to not have faults. And in a perfect world, I guess maybe that happens, but we're all human, and vehicles are made by humans. So we do have that margin of error. For me, it's allowable, because I enjoy driving the vehicle.
If you were a Toyota salesperson and I came into your dealership and I had already spoken with you and told you, hey, I'm looking for something performance oriented, what would you tell me to point me in the direction of that Supra that you think that will make me pull the trigger on purchasing that vehicle?
Well, as a salesman, if I were the salesman, I wouldn't say anything. I'd give you the keys.
That's a perfect answer.
I'd give you the keys, because once you drove that vehicle, once you drive something like this, if you're in the market for purchase, it's pretty much gone. It's a done deal. Now, if it was in the event that you were not able to drive it, I just throw out some specs for you. You know, most people that buy Supras do not buy them to keep them stock.
Right.
They don't. So, and dealers probably want to shy away from this because of warranty reasons. But, you know, me being me, hey, you have these cars with simple upgrades, and they're running 10-second quarter-mile times.
Let's talk
it's a
about
very
that.
fast car.
Let's talk about that. So what does Toyota say that vehicle stock would do to quarter mile?
Depending on your source, anywhere from a 12.3 to a 12.1 at about 100 and between 117 and 119.
Okay. Now, with some simple upgrades, and because you sent me some information, but I'm going to let you talk about it. Just tell everybody out here the modifications that were made to a stock brand new Supra to drop this from a 12-second car to a 10-second car.
A $400 downpipe. That's $400 with shipping and taxes, actually. So that's a $400 downpipe, and the downpipe is something that comes off the turbocharger and basically where your catalytic converter sits and then to your exhaust. That's a downpipe. It's probably, 2.5 feet long, this downpipe, this little section of piping, and a tune from a reputable tuner. That's it. And what that tune does is it basically just increases the boost pressure by a couple of pounds, increases your fuel flow because of the added air, and they lift some of the parameters for the torque limiters. So this car has a lot of computers in there, and they lift some of the parameters to a more, and the reason why they lift them is because they know pretty much the way the car was engineered. It was engineered to handle a lot more torque than what the car puts out from the factory. And the evidence of that is when you look at the 2020 versus the 2021. When you look at the ECU settings, the 2021 has much higher torque parameters than the 2020. So we know the vehicles are capable. But you're talking a 10.9 second quarter mile time with a $400 downpipe and a $400 to $500 tune.
And that's just crazy.
1090s at goodness gracious, I think it was 121, and that was on street tires.
Yeah.
On stock tires, Michelin Pilot Super Sports.
You know, we were early in the show, I was telling the listeners about this one particular Supra, and it was actually a 2020. You had sent me the information on this. They got it down to 8-second car, but that was with a lot more invested than just, a downpipe and an ECU tune. They had to do, I think you said they had nitrous and a couple other things on that vehicle. A lot more than, $800 to $1,000. But for you to spend less than $1,000 and drop 2 seconds off a quarter mile, that's crazy, man.
Well, that particular car is down in Florida, and I mean, just a quick rundown. There are a lot more things done to that car, but one of them is a pure 800 turbo upgrade that costs you $2,300. The other one is a downpipe that costs you $300. They said a lot of nitrous, so I don't know what a good nitrous kit costs. Let's just say $1,000. Port injection costs you about $500-$600. That's it in a tune. So if you add that up, that's less than, heck, man, I believe that's less than $7,000 worth of mods to get deep into the eights. Well, I don't want to say deep into the eights. It was like an 890, I believe, but it's a deep 9-second car. Now, and this is on slicks. So it's a deep 9-second car for less than $10,000, much less than $10,000.
Man, that is amazing. Amazing. If there was anything that you would, I won't say if there was, is there anything you change about the car, or are you a happy, satisfied customer?
I am a happy and satisfied customer, but enthusiasts always want more. We always want more. As far as from the factory, is there anything I would change? I'd probably get rid of some of the car pumps in like artificial sound. I'm starting to understand. It pumps in a small amount of artificial sound, and you can get rid of it. It's in the software.
Okay.
It pumps in, which is that's not a big deal. I don't know why. I don't know why Toyota did that. That's one thing I would do. I'd get rid of. I probably would have gotten rid of it doesn't have the traditional front mount intercooler that your cars have, an air-to-air intercooler. It has an air-to-water intercooler,
okay,
which means the cooling is done at the intake manifold. Now, the reason for that is your boost track is very short coming from the turbo to your intake manifold, so the response is very quick. But modifications past, I'd say about 900 horsepower, it's going to require some type of engineering. That's one of the things I would change about the car. I would make it a traditional air-to-air. And Mrs. Late Apex just walked by and she's moving her right hand. She's not a fan of automatics. She wants a good old-fashioned stick shift. She would have a manual transmission with a good old-fashioned clutch, old 3-pedal car. But other than that, that's pretty much it. I believe one of those, I don't want to call it an issue. I believe one of those will be addressed by Toyota, and we may see a manual this year. We just might.
Now with the what speed manual do you think it will be? Do you think they're going to stick with I've never seen an 8-speed manual.
I've never seen one either, but I remember back in the day, the old Volvo 740s was basically, it was a 5-speed car, but when you looked at the gate, it was only gated for four forward gears, and it had a button at the center of the stick shift that you pushed. That was basically a 5th gear. So I doubt if we see anything like that, but my guess is it'll probably be a 6 or a 7 speed.
That'd be something very interesting to see. Now, as far as the paddle shift, how do you like the paddle shift?
I love the paddle shift. I'm old and I'm lazy. So I like to be able to get in the car and cruise down the highway with my wife and put the car in drive and just go. Ease down the road. The car gets, at 70 miles per hour, we were getting 39 miles to the gallon.
Are you serious? Wow.
Yes, a car with that kind of performance, we were getting right at 39 miles to the gallon at 70 miles per hour. So it's pretty efficient. And then when I want to act up a little bit, I can tap the paddles or put it in the manual mode, and I can control the shifts myself. So it's the perfect gift from Toyota and BMW as far as I'm concerned. I really didn't want a manual transmission vehicle. I really didn't.
Okay.
I prefer the performance and the convenience of an automatic. I know that some of the diehards are going to be like, we're going to catch this guy and have a conversation with him. But people have different needs. My driving, people say they don't feel connected to the car when it's an automatic. Well, I get my connection from the steering wheel. So I'm a big front end feedback person. Front end feedback, back, and brake feel. So the car is communicating with me through the steering wheel, through the brakes, and as I put the car through a curve. What the transmission is doing, that's minor. As far as I'm concerned, the stick is just sitting there vibrating.
Gotcha.
Like I don't get any, it's not telling me where the car is as far as its limits go. And neither does the paddle shift. But when you have paddle shifters, it allows you to focus more on the communication that the car is giving you back as you're going through a turn. So I don't knock people for wanting a 6-speed. A lot of people want them for different reasons. Some people have pleasure with rolling through the gears. My pleasure is feeling what the front end is doing, feeling what the chassis is doing as I'm accelerating out of a corner. I don't have to take my hands off of the steering wheel. Like, I can put 100% focus into that apex. So that's kind of more on the performance side of things.
Well, Mr. Late Apex, I don't want to keep you any longer. I know you've probably got some things to do. Don't want to take up too much of your time on the weekend here. I really, really appreciate you spending some time with us and letting us know, you know, some of the ins and outs of your 2021 Toyota Supra. But Mr. Late Apex, thank you so much for your time, man. We really appreciate you. And we're looking forward to getting together for part 2, where we can let our listeners also become viewers and they can see the performance and what this car can do. Because when we do part 2 and have video, we're bringing the bikes out and we're bringing some more cars out and we're hitting these back roads and we're going to let y'all see what this thing does. That sound like a plan to you, sir?
That sounds like something that we need to do immediately.
Sounds good. Mr. Late Apex, thank you so much, man. And you have a great rest of the day. And we look forward to speaking with you soon, sir.
All right. Take it easy.
All right. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you hear the music, so you know what time it is. Our time together has officially, yet unfortunately, come to an end. I would very much like to thank our special guest today, Mr. Late Apex, for letting us know the joys and the awesomeness of the 2021 Toyota Supra. We really appreciate you taking the time to share that wonderful information with us, Mr. Late Apex. As always, we want to thank OmniBeats.com for providing the music for the show. And above anything, I want to thank you guys, the listeners. Thank you all so much for coming back and enjoying the show week after week. Just a little update. Thanks to you all. This show, Ride Hard or Stay Home, the podcast, we're being listened to in over 20 different countries, 135 different cities, you guys. It's amazing. So thank you all once again for just taking a few minutes out of your week to come spend some time with us at Ride Hard or Stay Home, the podcast, dedicated to all things fast, ride it hard, or stay home. We will see you next week. Have a good week.
Ride hard, stay home, the podcast.